Hello, this is Tony Blazier for the Motocross Vault presented by Blinzall. If you're in the market for some high-quality racing oil for your two-stroke or four, make sure you go to blinzall.com and use our discount code VAULT20 to save 20% at checkout. Thank you for all the support.
Hey, I'm Steve Matthes. Welcome to Tony Blazier's Motocross Vault.
Hello and welcome back to the Motocross Vault. My name is Tony Blazier, and what this video is going to cover is a look back at my picks for the 10 best gear lines of all time. Now, I am a huge fan of motocross gear. Obviously, all of us are into motocross are probably gear connoisseurs at heart. I love the different designs. It's one of the fun things about motocross is we can get to be so, I guess, outlandish and bold in our choices. Some of the stuff we wear, obviously, we wouldn't wear it to the mall. It's a little bit over the top. But as a lot, motocrossers love kind of over-the-top designs. And over the years, there's been some really crazy ones. Now, for this list, what I've done is I look back at my picks for the best overall gear lineups. Not one set of gear, not one colorway. Just as a brand each year, you know, what Fox, No Fear, whoever it is, how they did and how that stacks up in my top 10 hierarchy. Now, I'm probably showing my age in that I don't have a whole lot of new gear on this list. I prefer, really, my favorites are from the 90s and 2000s, really. There are some new stuff that I do like. I mean, obviously, I don't hate most of the designs that are out today, but for some reason, maybe nostalgia or whatever else, I certainly lean back to some of the older stuff. I think that depending on your age, you may or may not think my gear picks are crazy, but this, of course, is my opinion, my list, and I would love to hear what everybody thinks in the comment section below. I did a companion podcast with Steve Matthes here at Pulp MX where I write for him, and we did a podcast where I actually did an article and the podcast with him, so you can actually read, if you like, my thoughts on these gear choices and then Mathes's rebuttal, or you can find the podcast, and I will actually link that here in the video as well, so if you'd like to check out the podcast, you can hear what Matthes thinks. Clearly, he doesn't agree with me on everything. This is pretty much the normal course. He thinks I'm a little crazy with some of my choices, but hey, it's my list and my choices, so he has to live with it. If you'd like to check out some of the other videos I've done many more classic bike reviews, some geared stuff as well. So you'll find everything motocross related on my channel, from classic magazine reviews to ATV reviews, a little bit of everything, really. I try to be pretty agnostic on that stuff. If you like to support what I do, I have Motocross Vault merch available. I have stuff with designs from all the major manufacturers on it, from Kawasaki, Yamaha, Suzuki, and Honda, of course. A bunch of different designs. So if you'd like to support what I do, I'll put a card here in the video and a link in the description below. So here, without further ado, are my picks for the 10 best gear lines of all time. Here in 10th place on my list, we have Xtreme motocross gear from 1994. 1993 was the first year for Xtreme, and this stuff is really good looking there, in my opinion. The 94 stuff is very similar. There's not a whole lot of difference between these first 2 years, and I love them both. I know some people did not really appreciate the big black stripe on the side of his pants, but I thought it looked good. It really kind of sets off the colors of the gear, and the color is really one of the things I loved about this stuff. It really popped. Looked great, very bright. I love all the color combos. Matasevich in the purple and yellow looked awesome. The orange and blue, orange and purple really, was a real good look as well. I even like kind of the weird aquamarine look that they had there with the purple. I think this stuff is just really great looking. It looks great even to me today. I remember Larry Rossler off-road riding in it, and I believe Ty Davis too might have had this stuff on in the early 90s. It looked great. The No Lean Sizzler team looked amazing. It just had a real great style, in my opinion at least. I know some people don't really like the big black stripe on the side of the pants, Matthes being one of them, but I think it looks great even today. I mean, obviously the materials weren't probably as good as what you got with AXO Sport at the time. I don't think it was nearly as well built, but the gear looked good, and I think that's, you know, really what I'm talking about here. I'm not really trying to focus on the quality of the gear. Obviously, some stuff's better made than others, but in terms of style, I thought this Xtreme stuff was really great looking. I had the clear chest protector as well, and I thought it looked really great at first, although it did get pretty dingy looking after you rode with it a little bit. It got all scratched up, but overall, I thought this stuff in 93 and 94 was really great looking, and certainly worthy of the top 10 on my list, at least for me personally. I think Xtreme was really great in terms of gear, probably till about 1996, and then they took a turn when they changed the logo around in 97, went with like a circular logo with a big X in the middle. I didn't really care for that look nearly as much, but this first generation 93, 94 era was really great looking stuff, and that's why I picked it as the number 10 gear on my list. Next up in 9th place, we have one of the real gear powerhouses, maybe the gear powerhouse of the 1980s, JT Racing. And for this choice, I picked 1989. I think this is a really great year for JT. Kind of really the pinnacle before things kind of took a turn for the worse, I think, in the early 90s. JT was awesome, certainly through the, I guess, early 80s until this era kind of here at the late 80s is really their era where they were really the best gear in motocross, in my opinion. JT looked great here. This is the era where they had the Dalmatians. They had the Bad Bones gear. I remember I saw a buddy of mine got the Bad Bones stuff in 1988, and I just thought it was the most amazing looking stuff I'd ever seen. Really cool stuff. I love the cyan and pink look that Brock Glover ran in 1988, which is carried over from 1989. One of my all-time favorite looks. When you combine it with his cool custom painted helmet and the V2000 chest protector, it's just a really great look, in my opinion. I love all this stuff. Really, the only gear that I didn't really love as much, the bad boy stuff. This is the first year that Rick Johnson went over to JT Racing after a dispute with Fox Racing and Honda Line. And I don't really love the bad boy stuff. It's not terrible by any means. I was never a big fan of that bad boy logo thing. Johnson was my favorite rider, but that really just didn't appeal to me as much. I will say I did like it better than the Cyborg stuff they came out with a year later than this. But for the most part, though, this is a great year for JT. I love the goggles. I mean, they had so many great stuff in this era. The flex-on gloves are a little bit weird, but for the most part, this stuff holds up well, I think, in terms of style. All the JT gear, you could easily pick probably 4 or 5 years in the late 80s where JT could have been on the list. For me, at least, I think 89 kind of has most of the styles I really loved. I don't think if you went with a different year, 86, 87, 88, you probably could get away with that pick as well. But I think most of the stuff in the lineup this year is really good looking. Even the confetti stuff, while it's not my favorite, it's not bad looking gear in my opinion. So JT really had it firing on all cylinders in the late 80s, and at least for me, 1989 is the one that makes the list. For the 8th spot on my list, I went with Fox Racing in 1994. This gear here in 94 is really, really iconic. This is the first year they went with the earth tones, which were surprising and different at an era where everything was neon, lots of purple colors, lots of bright reds, pinks and what have you. And this is the year that they went with the forest green, the rust, the kind of a copper and gray color. Just some really interesting color combos that were just completely different than what was available at the time. I really love the rust red and indigo. It's one of my all-time favorite color combos. It's just great looking stuff. The forest green is great. This year they also came out with an anniversary line, kind of a tribute to their 25th anniversary that was that iconic red and yellow that I always loved that they ran in the early 70s. And this gear is colorful but much less busy. Fox, when they kind of hit home run in 1989 with the zebra colorway and all the prints, that stuff was obviously really game-changing and great-looking gear in its own right. But by 91, I think they had kind of lost their way a little bit and went overboard with throwing all kinds of different prints on everything. And in 93, they kind of took a turn back to sanity, toned things down quite a bit. I love the 93 as well, but this 94 really gets it for me because of the earth tone and all the different color combos this year. It just stands out as a very interesting era for Fox, and I love this gear. It's really good-looking stuff, in my opinion. I think if you came out with it today, it would still sell really well. Fox gear at this time was really well built, fit well, looked great, still holds up well in my opinion, and that's why I picked it as the number 8 pick on my list of the best gear lines of all time. Up next in 7th place, we have Thor in 2006. Thor in the mid-2000s was a powerhouse team. They had Jeremy McGrath, they had Chad Reed, they had the entire pro circuit team. They had Ivan Tedesco, who at the time was considered to be a really up-and-coming rider. Really a lot of star power in that team. And the gear in this era is fantastic, in my opinion. Really easily my favorite era for Thor. I'm not a giant fan of Thor today. They have a few gear lines, basically the stuff that Cooper Webb wears is pretty innocuous. It's nothing to write home to mother about. It's not offensive. And then they have their wacky stuff like the kitten gear and some other strange things they do. I don't really love any of it. I'm not a big fan of the whole painted-on gear look that was started by Seven a few years back. I prefer this era for gear in general, and I think this stuff here, particularly in 2006, is really great-looking stuff. I love the blue and kind of cream color, which is really unique and interesting and different. Just a classy look, in my opinion. I like this jersey. I love the kind of Thor logo in the middle of it. Now today, of course, you wouldn't want that kind of stuff. That Thor is actually kind of a rubberized material, and it actually adds a little weight to the jersey, but Now everything is minimalist and try to be as thin as light as possible, but I prefer this kind of gear. I still have a couple of sets of this stuff. I had a set of the AC Vintage stuff in the green and brown, which I just thought was a really interesting color combo. Good looking stuff, in my opinion. Still looks better than anything they're doing today, I think. This is also the year you had that really interesting kind of Dukes of Hazzard bootleg gear that Travis Pastrana ran at Daytona. That was very unique. Just a really good era for Thor, and I think that they really kind of knocked it out of the park here in 2006. I really could have gone with 04, 05, 06, really 07. There were several years here in the mid-2000s where Thor was just really firing off on all cylinders. I'm not sure what happened. They kind of, at least in my opinion, feel like they've kind of lost their way a little bit in terms of design the last decade or so, but the 2000s really were a great era for Thor, and at least for my money, 2006 was kind of the height of that awesomeness. Here in 6th place, we have another powerhouse of gear design, AXO Sport in 1991. I was always a fan of AXO, even in the late 80s. I thought there was some really good looking stuff, but most of that stuff in the late 80s was pretty low key. I mean, Jim Hale had some really nice, classy designs, but none of them really stood out in the way that the JT and Fox Racing stuff did in the late 80s, at least in my opinion anyway. But here in 1991, Jim hired Damon Bradshaw away from Fox Racing, and that obviously was a huge get for the company. And along with Bradshaw, they also brought an all-new design aesthetic to the stuff. This is the first year you had the gel print jerseys, which were really mind-blowing at the time. I actually had this pink and yellow version. In fact, I didn't even have gear that matched it. As I mentioned in the podcast I did with Matthes and in my article, I had, I think, JT at the time, and I went out and got this jersey. I couldn't afford all of it. This stuff was very expensive. I mean, this gel print jersey is $50 in 1991, which is, probably $100 now, and that is a lot of money if you think about it for a jersey. I mean, gear is actually, I think, mostly gone down, even though, inflation would say otherwise in terms of most everything else. But gear actually cost way more back in the day. At least this premium stuff did. You could have got Ocelot or something probably at a decent price. But if you wanted the good stuff, it was going to cost you a lot of money. And AXO Sport, they were really high quality. I think most stuff was made in Finland. And the pants were super durable. They were thick. I love the kind of pinstriping that was built into them. This 125 ST Kevlar pant was just a clean design. I just love the looks of it. Even now, it's just really nice. And I never had the pants this year. I ended up getting a complete outfit the year later in 1992. But that stuff wore like iron. I literally, I don't know, probably put thousands and thousands of laps on it. And it most of it I still have. It still looks good. The colors haven't faded. It looks, just as bright and nice as it did in 1992, which is a testament to the fact that, yeah, at $154, which again is more like $300 today, it was certainly very, very expensive, but the quality was there. The overall designs this year, they have some great colorways. You have new colorways for the Pentagon chest protector. I was never a fan of the Pentagon in terms of the first design where it was just plain white and blue. My friend of mine had one. It still does, actually, in his garage. And it's a pretty boring look, but when you started adding these colors to it, it really changed the overall aesthetic of it and really helped kind of make the Pentagon a much more attractive design. It still wasn't as advanced as like Fox's Roost 2 with the, the suspended shoulder pads and what have you. This is much more of a roost guard. It probably wouldn't do a whole lot if you were really to crash real hard, but definitely a good look in my opinion. Wasn't a huge fan of the Comp 3. The Comp 3 is a little busy this year, the cotton jerseys, but other than that, I think all this stuff is really cool. You had the really interesting Mission Control pants, which brought the new AXO logo to the Biofoam logo to the pants. This would be standard on all the pants a year later. Then this stuff is $179 in 1991, which is, again, that is a ton of money. That's like almost $400 in today's money for a pair of pants. So needless to say, I could not afford this. I was in college at the time and working part-time for a bank. So I had no money for this. I would have loved to have had it, but certainly Bradshaw made it look awesome. You also have the Peak team this year, started in 1991, and they're all in AXO Sport as well. Although I don't really love this 1991 version particularly. It's kind of boring, but it does match the motorcycle, but the gear itself is not as amazing. They have the new RC Kevlar boot. I had this boot. I thought it was a really great boot at the time. It gave me a lot of ankle support, which I liked. It was a little stiffer than like Alpine Star stuff. So depending on what your preference was, you might go one way or the other. The only problem was the buckles were kind of fragile, but the leather and the soles and everything else, at least for me, wore like iron. And I like the Kevlar on the inside of the knee. Boots used to be a little shorter. This was one of the first little like taller boots. and with the Kevlar there, it kept from roasting your leg. And I remember my CR used to always burn my inner calf on a long moto. So it was nice when they started adding this little feature to the boot. So 91 was a great year for AXO Sport. And this gear really was kind of the first AXO stuff that I think really made a mark for the brand and knocked it out of the park. In fifth place, we have another truly iconic year for gear, 1990 and Fox Racing. Fox Racing in this year is on fire with Jeff Matthes, the aforementioned Damon Bradshaw in their stable. They have some amazing looking gear. 89 easily could have made the cut. I know Mathis said he probably thought 89 might have been the better choice, but in my opinion, I actually like a few of the new colorways from 1990 in addition to the zebra print stuff. Obviously, when Zebra came out in late 88, I was completely blown away. I remember what my best friend ended up getting a set, and I was so jealous. I just thought that stuff was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. It was so different, even compared to like the JT Bonehead stuff and some of the other stuff JT was already doing. The Fox really set the standard, I think, for bold designs in this era. And for 1990, you get the new spiderweb print with the flow pink on the front, and that's the gear that Matasevich always wore. And my goodness, I just think it's a great look. Matasevich was always known for having amazing style on the motorcycle and amazing style in his clothes, his helmets, everything. And this year in 1990 in Fox, he just looked on fire. This is just a great look in my opinion. I even like the red and gray version of it. I thought that looked good. Bradshaw would wear that on occasion. I'm not really a giant fan of the zebra colorway with the red. I never thought that worked quite as well as the like kind of a powder blue and pink, but most of the stuff though is really great and it's really iconic. This is when Fox was really kind of leading the way for the industry and everybody else was trying to play catch up in this era. And in 1990, they just had some great stuff. Some of the new stuff, the confetti, which I actually got a retro version of a couple of years ago, and the new zebra print stuff, I think add a little bit of variety to the catalog. And I really think this is some good looking stuff. Still holds up well. I mean, obviously it might be a little crazy looking today, but I think it would still be popular. Obviously, when they bring it out in the retro version, people kind of clamor to it. You also get some new colorways in the Roost 2 this year. The Roost 2, it's like 5-6 years old at this point. Still looks great. In my opinion, at least, maybe the best looking chest protector any motocross company's ever come out with. And I think it held up well for many, many years with really minimal changes. They only changed a couple new colorways. That new flow pink version with the spider webs that Matasevich always ran looked awesome. You have a new kind of a shadow gray with pink accents I thought was really great looking. Even if you had on a Suzuki, the yellow is awesome. So definitely an iconic design that held up really well. And another amazing year for Fox Racing. In fourth place on my list, we have Shift Racing in 1997. This is the first year for Shift. Shift was an offshoot of Fox Racing. At the time, there was a kind of a push towards baggy gear in the industry, and we're thinking that they wanted to maybe dabble in that a little bit, but they didn't want to bring it to the main core Fox market. They wanted to do something a little bit more out there, and they wanted to spin off the brand into something a little more edgy, and Shift Racing ended up being that thing, although it never really went much in the baggy way. They did have some baggy gear. I think by the time that Shift Racing kind of caught on, the baggy phase was actually almost out the door. You had a few, gear sets with Seth and stuff wearing the baggy stuff, but I think, again, by the late 90s, early 2000s, it was kind of running its course. But here in 1997, you have all new stuff. You have Jeff Emig making the switch from Thor to Shift, and it really was a combination of the right rider in the right gear at the right time. I love this design. It's very simple, actually. There's not a whole lot going on if you look at it. There's only 4 colorways. The gear is fairly, as I said, very simple, but I think it looks great. They had a nice choice with the colors. The overall design is so clean and timeless, and that's what I think really makes it hold up so well. It's not crazy in the way so many other gear designs are. I mean, as much as I like that 1990 Fox stuff, it obviously really dates itself. If you look at it now, it's definitely you can tell what era it's from. It's kind of over the top in its overall design. But this Shift stuff is clean and classy and timeless, and Emig just looked awesome in it. I know Mathis didn't like this 97 as much as 98 and 99. Personally, I prefer 97. I think it's a little cleaner design, but 98 and 99 also really good looking stuff. I mean, I can't fault any of that. Shift really was doing so well here. They came out of the chute on fire in 97. And really for the first, 4 or 5 years, they were on top of it and putting out some great stuff. They really kind of lost their way in the mid-2000s. They came out with some really funky stuff there with the Justin Brayton and Josh Grant era that I was definitely not on board with. But they did come back in 2012 with Chad Reed's awesome new shift gear and kind of revitalized the brand. I was real close to putting Chad Reed in 2012 and that new shift gear on the list, but in the end I went here with the first version in 1997. I just think it's a little more timeless, just a clean, iconic design that I think, at least for me, is definitely worthy of my top 10. All right, we're getting into the heavy hitters, and here in third place we have No Fear in 2000. No Fear was started in 1999, at least the motocross side of it. No Fear had been around for several years. It kind of came out of Jeff Surwall and the original kind of Life's a Beach stuff in the late 80s with Rick Johnson, and eventually they moved out of just doing t-shirts and hats and stickers to motocross gear here in the late 90s, and they really hit the ball out of the park pretty much from the very beginning. I didn't love the 99 design quite as much. I think the 2000 is a much bolder look. I like the new colorways. The overall design this year is great. I bought 2 sets of gear. I had the gold, or I guess yellow and red, in a couple of different versions, the vintage and non-vintage, and I thought the stuff looked great. It still looks great to me today. No Fear hit the ground running with a lineup of star riders here. They had Sebastian Tortelli, Jeremy McGrath, and Kevin Windham in 99, and then in 2000 they added the biggest star in the sport, Travis Pastrana, and it was a great year for No Fear in general. You had Jeremy kicking butt indoors. You had, actually, Windham had a very decent year here in 2000. He was very good on the factory Honda. And, of course, Travis won the outdoor title on his factory Suzuki. The gear is great looking. I loved it. It was, again, still some of my favorite of all time. I still have the jersey. I wish I had the pants. I ended up selling the pants. I don't know what the hell I was thinking. I sold the pants on eBay, I don't know, 7-8 years ago, which was an idiotic move because now I like having all that old stuff to look at. But I wish I'd kept it. The later No Fear stuff, I didn't like quite as much. Pretty much through the mid-2000s, they're really good-looking gear sets. But then towards the end, I think they kind of took a few turns for the worse. But the early 2000s, though, really great stuff. I know some people love the 99. I don't love it as much as this. 01's very similar to 02, but for me, the sweet spot is 2000. Really one of my all-time favorite gear designs, and worthy of the third spot on my list. Next up in second place is Fox Racing in 1986. I was real close to putting this as the number one pick on my list just because it's such an iconic and game-changing year for Fox. But in the end, the brand that I picked for number one was just a little closer to my heart than this. Fox Racing kind of took a major turn for the better in 86. They had basically been a pretty solid brand, I guess, for the late 70s, early 80s. But this is where Pete Fox's influence in terms of overall design really starts to take hold. And they came out with some iconic designs here in 86. You have Rick Johnson's new stadium jersey with the kind of white sleeves and the blue or red insert. I have one of those jerseys here in my home office, and I love it. I had it back in 1986. I thought it was a really cool design then, and it looks great today, I think. Obviously, compared to like 89 and 90, this stuff is very plain. But I think it's important to take it in context of its time, and for me at least, I thought this was just an amazing looking set of gear. You had the Fox flag stuff this year with the red, white, and blue Fox logo on it that I thought looked awesome. You had the stuff that Ricky wore in the USGP, which was like half red, half blue. Again, not nearly as crazy as like a zebra stripe, but for its time, it was really cool and kind of set the gear apart. This is the year you have the new Fox flag belt, which was a kidney belt that was super popular. Obviously, most people don't wear, in fact, almost nobody, I don't think, wears kidney belts anymore, but this was a really big seller for them at the time. I love this era when they had the name of the manufacturers on the gear. You know, if you had your Suzuki, you had your yellow and blue Suzuki pants and your Honda, red and blue Honda pants. I just love that. Kind of sad when it went away. And I never understood that because the manufacturers, really, you're advertising their brand. So whatever, you know, this corporate America, corporate Japan always has their different ideas about this stuff. But I think all this stuff looks great. The Kawasaki jersey looks cool. The neon green, all of this stuff looks great. This red, white, and blue jersey that he has with the Fox flag on it is really one of my all-time favorite designs. Just a really cool look here in 86. You also get the new Comp 2 boots, which was made by Alpine Star, introduced this year at $175. Again, that's actually pretty comparable for what a Highline boot would run you today if you adjust for inflation. I always wanted one of these. I never had a set. But they were really, Fox kept running these things for 5 or 6 years until maybe 91 when they came out with the Chameleon boot, which turned out to be a huge flop. But this is one of those designs designs that stood the test of time. Still looks great today, in my opinion. The only thing that kind of really dates it is the Velcro closures, which were all the rage at the time. You also get the new Roost 2 this year. This is the first year for the Roost 2, which, as I said, is one of the all-time awesome chest protectors in motocross history, and stayed in the Fox lineup for another 10 years, basically unchanged except for some decal changes and a few colorways additions. Definitely an all-time design, in my opinion. And I think while it's not as bold in many ways as some of the later stuff, I think it holds up the test of time and looks great today, and really is important in its overall effect on the industry and what it did to push kind of Fox to the forefront. So that's why I basically thought it should rank the second on my list. All right, here in first place, we have my all-time favorite gear, the 1992 AXO Sport lineup. I still adore this gear. I have a couple of sets of it myself still. There's a soft spot in my heart. I won my first, really when I started doing much better in motocross. I won my first race in this orange colorway, the orange and rhodamine. It'll always have a little bit of a soft spot in my heart for that. But also, just as great looking gear in my opinion. Bradshaw was so on fire in 92. I was a huge Bradshaw fan, so that may have colored my opinion of this as well. But taken objectively, I still think it's one of the best looking gear combos ever. I love the Aquator jersey this year, particularly in the purple and green. My best buddy Jamie had this stuff, and I just thought it looked amazing. Still looks amazing to me today. I don't know that any gear you buy today is, to me, better looking than this. I think it looks awesome. Obviously, the gel prints look amazing this year. They're much more toned down than they were in 91. They're not as crazy as the 91 design. The 91 design was very interesting. I love it, but it's not nearly as kind of low-key as this 92. The 92 with the more solid colorways. Probably an overall better look in my opinion, but kind of splitting hairs there. These newer versions of the pants are very similar to the last couple of years, but they had some new colorways. I love this design with like the foam, the biofoam logo in the middle. Gave you a little thigh protection if something hit you there. Like again, pants now, there's not a whole lot there. They just try to make them as light as possible. This gear, the material is very thick. The pants are heavy if you pick them up, but they're very protective. The inner legs, Kevlar again to protect you from getting burned. It also was good if you wore knee braces. They wouldn't wear through there nearly as easy. This stuff wore like iron. It was very expensive. I mean, as I said, these pants are like $180 in 1992, so they're not cheap, but they last me probably 2 or 3 times longer than my JT stuff, which would just kind of fall apart in this era. These pants, you could wear these for a couple of years without any trouble. So you definitely got your money out of them, even though they cost a lot. If you factored in how long you could use them, the amount of wear and tear they could take, they actually seem like a pretty decent value to me. You have a great look for the new HRC stuff this year that Stanton wore. In the late 80s and early 90s, the TX10 stuff, the Honda line stuff, was never particularly good looking in my opinion. It was always pretty hideous, actually. Well, actually, hideous is probably strong. More boring than hideous. But here in 92, you have a new version that AXO Sport did that is much better looking. The stuff, I had this, basically a t-shirt with this exact setup with Stanton's name and number on the back. Stuff looked just like his jersey. I thought that was so cool. I wore that thing literally till it had holes in it. It just fell apart. I wish I still had it. But this is good looking gear. The Aquator, as I said, very cool. This is one of the first jerseys that was designed to wick away sweat. Instead of just having like, a cotton jersey, this thing actually let it breathe. It's a very interesting, I still have this jersey. If you feel it now, it's very soft, but it's this strange material. I don't even know how to describe it exactly, but it's kind of weird, but I thought it was way advanced at the time. The gel prints were so hot, I ended up just cutting holes in mine because they just didn't breathe. They were like a turtleneck sweater, basically. So you have a jersey version you could wear in the heat was nice. I'm not sure why they just didn't go with a ventilated jersey, but in any case, this Aquator is designed to wick away sweat, and it was very cool at the time. You have a new version of the Peak gear this year for Pro Circuit. I do prefer the 92 version here to the 91. It's a little more bold. Again, that gel print, though, was super hot. Probably okay for Jeremy in the stadiums at night, but if you were to wear it out on an outdoor race, you're going to melt down. I got an all-new boot this year. I upgraded to the RC2s, which added 4 buckles instead of the ratchets at the top. I still have these boots in my garage. They're kind of old and half falling apart, but I wore these things for 4 or 5 years, and they wore like iron for me, at least. The only problem, again, were the buckles. The buckles, if you weren't careful, you could bust those, but the actual construction of the rest of the boot was super durable. Just a great overall design. I love this stuff, and it may be somewhat tied to my own personal success in them and my love of Bradshaw, but to me at least, it holds the test of time, and I just think it's one of the all-time best gear sets any manufacturer did, and in my opinion, worthy of the #1 spot on my list. So there you have it. Those are my picks for the 10 best gear lineups of all time. I would love to hear what everybody thinks in the comment section below. I'm sure there's going to be some agreement, maybe some disagreement. As I said in the video, I was real close to putting the shift stuff here that Chad Reed came out with in the early 2000s. That was probably my closest pick to one of the more modern, newer gear lineups. Again, I'm sure I'm showing my age with some of my choices here, but I just love that, you know, the 90s and early 2000s were a great era for gear, in my opinion. And some of that stuff really stands up, you know, in terms of the design. Obviously, the gear itself, you know, it would be, the materials would be old-fashioned. But I think if you redid some of that gear now with modern materials, man, it would sell really well. But, you know, maybe I'm just showing my age. If you like this sort of thing, make sure you check out the other videos I've done. If you could share, subscribe, and let everybody know on social media, I would very much appreciate it as well. So until we meet again, this is Tony Blazier for the Motocross Vault. Keep the rubber side down. Peace.